Alright, let's talk about three more movies. The first one we're going to talk about by way of Amazon, which is Without Remorse, or Tom Clancy's Without Remorse, whatever you want to call it, where Michael B. Jordan is playing John Clark, and it's basically like more like a John Clark origin story, because he goes by John Kelly through pretty much the whole movie, and then the John Clark thing's at the end, despite the fact that all the synopsis will tell you he's playing John Clark, and really, you would probably need to go into this already knowing what Without Remorse is and the whole Jack Ryan universe to even know who John Clark is, so it's not like it's a spoiler or anything. Because obviously we've seen John Clark in the movies before, where he was Willem Dafoe in Clear and Present Danger and Liev Schreiber in The Sum of All Fears. And it is to my understanding, I haven't read any Clancy that I remember, but it is to my understanding that this basically has nothing to do at all with the book that the title comes from. They just had Taylor Sheridan and a co-writer just do whatever the fuck, basically. To go, I don't know if this is supposed to go along with Krasinski's Jack Ryan show or not, or if it even is the same tone or anything like that. I haven't gotten to that yet either, but as far as it kind of fitting into this Jack Ryan universe, I can kind of see that, but at the same time it is where it kind of set itself up to be this sort of... It's not quite straight-to-video quality, but it feels... You at least get that sense of straight-to-streaming. Where we're introduced, even with somebody as big as Michael B. Jordan in the starring role, still, you have this opening scene where they're doing this mission that goes somewhat awry, goes awry for them, not so much for Jamie Bell, their superior, who's like kind of shady. And it's the whole thing where everybody's got their generic labels, where they kind of jokingly give themselves the generic labels of, oh, he's the badass, I'm the smartass, and all that shit. But it doesn't really matter because after this, they're all going to be picked off anyway, including Michael B. Jordan's pregnant wife, which is going to set up the vengeful plotline that we've seen a billion times before. And once it got to that point being the kind of setup, I was starting to wonder if, as great as Michael B. Jordan is and has shown to be, and he's really great with kind of the sort of intense action star kind of thing, where he could be an action star in like kind of the unconventional sense, where he could be like a bit more hardcore than your average action star. But at the same time, I was also kind of getting vibes of like let's say we're dealing with different characters here, but like say Morgan Freeman's Alex Cross is Harrison Ford's Jack Ryan. I feel like Michael B. Jordan's John Clark is similar to Tyler Perry's Alex Cross. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the vibe I was getting. From, like, the movies themselves, not necessarily how they fit in the roles. But as far as leading stuff like this and, like, those literary characters, literary might be a stretch, but you get it. Yeah, I was getting that vibe where this is maybe just, like, look at the Jack Ryan movies, really even Chris Pine's movie, and that this is basically going to kind of be like a low tier that. I mean, that is pretty much what it is, and I guess you could somewhat expect that since John Clark's kind of a side character in a couple of those, but, yeah. But I mentioned Taylor Sheridan's the co-writer. That would make sense, the fact that the director is the guy that did the second Sicario, which obviously is not near as beloved as this one, but I still liked fine, like well enough, so that wouldn't have really deterred me at all, or if anything might have kind of helped, at least a little bit, to where it would be competent, and it might have good action scenes at least. And you could say that for the most part. I mean, there are, like at the beginning here, when his initial team is kind of getting picked off to start off the plot, One of them is assassinated by way of a speeding van while they're taking the trash out, which is very funny, very unintentionally. I think it was the screaming sound effect that kind of put it over the edge of. I don't think that's what they were going for. I think this is supposed to be kind of. Because in the next scene, when the next guy gets picked off, it does feel like pretty brutal with the way it's executed. No pun intended. But there's. So you do get the sense that there's going to be a bit more of a. Well, I was going to say a bit more of a hardcore attitude than the Jack Ryan movies we've seen before, but Patriot Games, I remember kind of being in that general area also. Um, but it still feels like we're kind of in that same story territory, and there's really not. Like, the only thing kind of keeping it afloat is what Michael B. Jordan's going to be able to bring to it. So you have stuff like the fact that there's going to be some sort of, or there's supposed to be some sort of emotional core, because he has lost his pregnant wife to these mysterious villains in this mysterious plot. Um, and so he's, of course, he's kind of all business when it first happens, and you're kind of like, oh, is he going to even react to this? But yeah, he spends, like, it seems like there's kind of a delayed reaction, but then yes, once he reacts, he kind of spends the rest of the movie reacting. Like, really, the kind of the plot of the movie is his reaction. But I mean, as far as, like, emotion, he does get a couple of, like, big moments where it finally, like, the initial reaction does come. It's just delayed because he's kind of all business at the start. And then we get these very interesting scenes. They might be a little over the top, but I kind of like them anyway. Where he does, we'll say, interrogation by fire. In a very over the top fashion, but the kind of recklessness that's kind of like where you can see, like, that thing where you were kind of begging for a reaction from him initially, and it's like then when you get it like completely tenfold or 20-fold or whatever you want to say, and he just goes off for like the entire rest of the movie. And if that's the kind of thing that you're into, and I kind of am, it might not be that bad, even if it seems like it's kind of, we've been here before and done this kind of thing before and all that. There's also a plane crash scene that's pretty well done also. But as far as like characters go, obviously a lot of them are going to be kind of one-dimensional. We've got the Greer character that we've seen James Earl Jones play before. His niece is in this as well, who Jodie Turner-Smith is playing. And she's fine also in this part where she's kind of got to have like the whole no bullshit vibe and the really sort of, you get the vibe that she's the superior to those around her, and like there's kind of an intimidation factor to her a little bit. You've got Guy Pearce in here as a... Guy Pearce seems to just have a knack for like the is he shady or is he not superior kind of guy. Then you've got the guy who's definitely coming off shady, who we've mentioned with Jamie Bell, who like kind of immediately just has all the neon signs pointing to him saying, you can't really trust me very much. Which they may or may not take in some interesting directions or some unexpected directions. Which, you know, I can appreciate. But when it comes down to it, it does eventually just kind of get to where it's just kind of pure action for like its entire second half. And I can see people maybe getting a bit tired of that as it goes on. But I kind of thought it was well executed enough. Like, there's a point in time when they've got a couple of snipers after them. And there's always something about, like you take it back to like Full Metal Jacket or something, like the sniper concept is like really good for like suspense and in scenes like this that are already kind of frenetic at the start, and then it kind of brings a sort of antagonist to just a standalone scene, like not a main antagonist for the movie, but just one for the one particular scene. Can add kind of a whole other suspense level to it as you go kind of step by step until you get to the actual climax. Which is interesting because I guess you could say the climax is this entire portion of the movie that's kind of basically the second half. Because if you want to call the end, the climax, where everything kind of wraps itself up, it's really not much of a climax. It kind of is just, oh, this is us dealing with that, and then that's it. So, yeah, it kind of feels a bit, I guess, all over the place at times, especially when it's, like I said, not all the executions are great, but as far as when it's like full on into the action, then it seems to find a footing enough where it's kind of like it's one of the few times where it seems like it kind of knows what to do with itself. But I feel like it does that stuff well enough, and then having the presence of Michael B. Jordan in the middle of it is going to help. Like I said, even if it tends to go kind of over the top, like when he does the whole thing when all the guards like come into his cell and he's just fighting them off by himself, him in a sink, just him in a sink. He's not like wielding this sink or holding this sink or anything. It's him and the sink as separate entities fighting off guards. Yeah. So that's not quite as ridiculous as that made it sound, but it's a little over the top. But I don't know. It was somewhat working for me, honestly. Like I said, I wasn't really gonna go into this with like a, some really high bar. Like I do like the other Jack Ryan movies quite a bit, but they have like a sort of, I don't think, as far as I remember, I don't think any of them are bad. But there's enough of a difference in quality from each movie that I don't automatically go into a movie like this thinking like, expectations are high, the bar is high, they need to hit this particular, they need to be as good as Not for Red October or as good as Clear and Present Danger or whatever. Like I said, I guess this one's the most comparable to Patriot Games if you want to compare it to a Jack Ryan movie. Because obviously, John Clark is his own character, but you don't really get much of that through this in particular. Like I said, Michael B. Jordan makes a good action hero, and he's definitely got that intensity for it. But it's like as far as being like an individual character rather than like as far as being different from every other revenge-driven character we've seen in stories like this, not so much. And there is a mid-credit scene that sets up what I'm guessing is supposed to be like a direct sequel that comes from another one of the books. Now, I don't know if this is another case of they're gonna name it after a book but not go in that direction at all, but yeah, they clearly want to do multiple things with this, so I guess we'll see how that goes for them. I could pretty much take it or leave it, but yeah. Like I was saying, I don't know if this is gonna somehow tie into like the Jack Ryan series. I'm assuming. I mean, not to say that Krasinski's not big, but I mean, I can't imagine like Michael B. Jordan at where he's at now, like doing like some sort of TV crossover thing. So I imagine this will just kind of be its own thing in its own direction. But I don't know. I guess we'll see if anything happens at all, and if anything at all, what that is. So yeah. So it's as far as just being a regular action movie, it's perfectly fine to me. But I can see people getting kind of tired of it relatively quickly. But whatever. So the second movie is going to be The Unholy, which is just another, it's been a little bit, I think, since we had some generic-ass horror movie, so why not? I want to have Jeffrey Dean Morgan bring it to us after he did The Possession in, what was that? God, I guess that was like 9 years ago. Because I saw, like, briefly a spot for this when I didn't know that it existed. It was like a YouTube ad. Because normally I don't watch ads, but it just kind of popped up and I didn't know what it was, and I was like, is that The Possession? Like, that movie that's like however old? No, it's just him doing another generic-ass horror movie. But it does have a pretty gripping opening scene where the whole opening is from the point of view of this woman that's being burned to death, and she's also having what appears to be a mask nailed to her face, which is really intense when it's a point of view shot, and like the way they use sound is like really sort of freaky and like really throws you into it. And it's a very brief scene. It's like the first 30 seconds, and then they show the title. But that's a 30 seconds that admittedly grabs you quite a bit. And then we immediately meet Jeffrey Morgan's character, who is this reporter who's on. I don't know if he's suspended or fired or what exactly, but he fabricated a story and basically got a lot of people lost their jobs. So that was his last story. Um, Now he's doing everything he can to kind of get back into the good graces of them, and he finds this whole story of this deaf mute girl that seems to be possessed by possibly the Virgin Mary, and is performing miracles potentially. But there's also a lot of sinister undertones and overtones. There's creepy dolls laying around. There's a creepy tree that turns into a shrine. And he's going to take full advantage of this to get this story. And he was giving me massive vibes of Richard Dees, the main character in The Night Flyer, the Stephen King story, and he was Miguel Ferrer in the movie. It basically feels like a continuation of that character, and I kind of don't mind. Like, you could say maybe he's ripping off a pre-existing character, but Jeffrey Morgan, who is an incredible actor playing this part also, kind of brings that certain... We kind of like him, but we can also totally see the sleazy side to him of just kind of using the story and using the girl and all that to get ahead. And then, of course, and he obviously sets something off by stepping on the head of this creepy doll for a reason that I can't quite figure. It's like basically they're just trying to build him up as, oh, he's just kind of a douchebag. He's gonna do douchebag things that just happen to unleash spirits. So it's one of the that's how the plot moves along. Basically, it's one of those, and you're gonna see all the cliches here. You've got the middle of the road scare where somebody's driving down the road and then they look at something else, and when they look back up, there's a person in the road and shit like that. It's all here, all of that stuff, all your basic ass jump scares. There is one moment I kind of appreciated that is genuinely creepy, kind of. And it's a nightmare sequence. And I think the reason I appreciated it, we're setting the bar low, it's not a fake out nightmare sequence. Like, it's clear at the start of the scene that it's a nightmare sequence. And I appreciated that, because the fake out nightmare sequence is so lame and predictable, and it's like, the fact that you can already kind of settle into, oh shit, we're in somebody's nightmare, we're about to see some fucked up shit. It is kind of cool that they just went with that. So at least there's that. And there's also the moment, the first time we kind of get a really good look at the tree at night. Like, this is a movie that kind of handles its night scenes kind of well and has like kind of a really creepy vibe to it. And the score kind of takes part in that also. The score is also interesting because of the scenes where like miracles are happening, where like, this paraplegic kid can suddenly walk because of the miracle that this supposed Mary is doing. But the way they keep the sinister undertone constant by, when we're seeing these miracles where all the characters are happy, the sinister score is happening kind of in the background. So I kind of like that tone, where that tone never leaves, even when all the characters in the movie are like happy, when we know they probably shouldn't be because of what's probably really causing this. So it handles that pretty well, and then yeah, it feels like kind of a bit of a leap when this first starts off, because it's like the girl goes outside to the tree and like the whole church just turns and watches her and follows her out there just to see what she's gonna do, and then it basically kind of becomes this whole thing. It's basically if you saw the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode where they people come in to worship the stain on the wall, it's basically what's happening here. Just in a more dramatic setting, I guess you could say. But yeah, there's still, your standard jump scares here. They're not as frequent as you might expect from a movie that's this generic. But I mean, they're in there, and some of them are quite silly. Like one where William Sadler is like kind of the main priest of the town, and there's a moment where the ghost or whatever it is, the apparition or whatever, like kind of jumps out at him. But it's basically just it's just taunting him or something. So we get this shot back to him after this big jump moment where we see the ghost, and the look on Sadler's face is just sort of like, huh. But that's like not the purpose. Like I think he's genuinely supposed to be scared because he was just scared in the scene before this happened. And it's like kind of the movie does that a few times where it tries to do like the double jump scare on you. Where there's the one that kind of gets you, and then they go for a big one like 10 seconds later, which can be obnoxious. But like I said, they're kind of relatively spread out for a movie like this. Like I said, it really just the whole thing really just depends on how low your bar is. Um, I've seen significantly worse horror movies than this, by far. So there are times where like with movies like this, generic is easy to say. All right, fine, you didn't fuck it up too bad, I guess. So depending on how far that goes for you, but yeah, we do get the same thing we always get where there's like an investigation aspect by like the hour mark where they're like digging around in basements and they're finding out information and history and all that stuff. Um, but I mean, there's no the opening scene. Everybody's gonna go into this movie knowing the opening scene tells you everything you need to know, and anything else is just additional information that's not really gonna matter. We get the gist of it. So yeah, there's no like mystery aspect to it or anything, despite the fact that it just kind of says, "Oh well, this is that portion of the generic horror movie where we have to find out who the ghost is and the history and all that stuff." When it's hardly relevant, and doesn't have too much to do with how to stop it. So, which is usually the reason for the scenes like this, but it's just kind of there because it's the routine. Um, and it's kind of funny as far as like where its power comes from and how you can potentially stop it is basically comparable to the end of Elf. Like you remember when the sleigh wouldn't fly unless people believed, and Zoe Deschanel sang and all that, and it's like people not believing maybe it loses its power. It's Elf basically. So yeah, that kind of takes the scare factor out of it, doesn't it? Even though it was kind of doing that itself. But I mean, like I said, I'll say again. To be fair, there are a few kind of creepy scenes in this, but none of the jump scares are like really notable. And it's like I said, it goes down all those same paths. Like it's almost like it's bored with itself, and it's like, well, this is what we have to do. This is what you do in movies like this. Take this direction, and so we can get to this ending or whatever. But I mean, I don't hate it. So, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan probably helps that a lot too because he's so incredibly charismatic, and that's gonna go a long way. And it's probably just the kind of thing this movie needs. Also, there's also a kind of untrustworthy priest played by Cary Elwes, and it's like that's just kind of perfect casting there. Like when he starts getting all unsavory, you're kind of like, I see why they cast him now because he's as far as what I've heard, Cary Elwes is like one of the nicest people you could ever meet in Hollywood. But there's just something about the way he plays unsavory characters that's so convincing, and it works. So yeah, it's like if this is your thing, just generic ass horror movies, this will like fill in a night for you, I guess, but it's not gonna leave really any impression at all. Um, the look of the ghost when we see it up close is kind of somewhat startling in a relatively simple way. Like it's not some elaborate design or anything. Actually, it's quite the opposite. But that might be why it kind of works. Like why it's kind of startling. So it has that going for it. So yeah, I mean it's fine, but it's the same old bullshit. So let's go on to our last one, which is The Virtuoso, which is basically a straight to video movie. Uh, where we have an actor who I know I've seen before, but I can't put a name on him, playing a hitman, and he's one of those. You can tell we're supposed to think it's real clever and really cleverly written because most of his lines are narration where he's telling us about his really clever methods as a hitman and all these clever little rules he gives himself on how to like not fuck up or how to get caught or how to not get caught or anything like that. And it's being real slick about itself. All the characters in the movie, with the exception of like one or two, are the something, like whatever they are in the story. So not a lot of names are thrown around. There's a mystery factor here in the plot where this hitman is given an assignment to go out and kill somebody. He's given a very vague clue, or a couple of vague clues, and then has to figure it out when, like, Eddie Morrison is here, and David Morse, and he keeps running into Abby Cornish, and Richard Brake, and maybe one or two people I'm forgetting. And he's hired to do this by Anthony Hopkins, who is his boss, and who was his father's boss, or his father worked with, or something. And yes, I don't think I would have sought this movie out, quite honestly, but I was just so, like, drawn to the idea of watching Anthony Hopkins in another straight-to-video thing, like, right after his second Oscar win. It's like, there's just something so interesting about that I have to experience watching this, because this is a brand new movie. And he actually has... It's like, you watch it and you're like, why did Anthony Hopkins take a job like this? And it's like, well, obviously because he loves to act, but it's like, he does get, like, a really big monologue at the very beginning. Like, his first scene is, like, a big monologue. It felt like it was at least maybe 10 minutes of just him monologuing, which is amazing, because he's, like, putting his all into it. Even when it's, like, shit movies like this, he still, like, goes all in. Which is great, but that's kind of where you kind of stop and you're like, okay, I'm really into this, but then when he leaves and you realize he's just such a supporting character, you just immediately start thinking, hold up, why isn't he like the main character? Like, why can't we go like down, like when he walks out of the scene and leaves us with this bland ass main character, it's like, why are we stopping? Like, why is the camera right here? Why can't we go with him? Like, come back, Hopkins. But no, it's just a tiny part once the rest of the movie goes on. And this main character is also having flashbacks where he has all these rules about not fucking up and how to do that and all that. Then he's got this little thing that drives him where he fucked up, of course. He shot the tires out of a car, and that car drove into a van, and it's because it's a straight-to-video movie. As soon as those two cars made contact, they exploded, naturally. And a person jumped out of the back of this van on fire, and they're running around and they're screaming, and it's just fucking hilarious. Like, fall on the fucking floor hilarious. But the main character doesn't think so. This has traumatized him. So it's gonna haunt him, which means we're gonna get to see it a couple more times, and it's it's Beetlejuice. It gets funnier every single time I see it. No, very serious backstory. Let's put our straight faces on. Let's put our straight faces on during this movie. Yeah, let's do that. Obviously the dialogue's going to be terrible, but the problem also is that this character has to have like a rapport with Abby Cornish, and there's sometimes where I can't tell which is worse between the dialogue itself and just Abby Cornish's general inability to deliver a line. I feel like there was a time in the past where Abby Cornish was a good actress, but I feel like it's been a long time. Even in stuff that's like my favorite movie that's here, like Three Billboards, it's like she's easily the most questionable performance in it. But yeah, these whole scenes between them are quite painful and extremely predictable. So that, and that's through like kind of like once she's introduced, she's basically there, basically the whole time, and that's like it was already like the only thing it really had going for it was that Hopkins monologue. But I mean, with the setup and with the other actors you have here, there could have been something worthwhile. But like I said, the fact that it always comes back to this main character who's all like, I mean, to talk about him specifically, he does have like that sort of stone face and not much presence. But the question is like, is that kind of the point with this kind of character? Like, because he's basically supposed to sort of blend into the background and just come and go like a ghost or whatever. But and we do get one scene where he's getting ready to talk to Abby Cornish again, and he's like looking in his rearview mirror, like basically practicing looking for like practicing looking like a normal person or how a normal person would act. Um, but it's all basically for naught because these Abby Cornish scenes are just absolute dead zones. They just stop. I mean, the movie's not even that good, but you can even sense where the movie is stopped in its tracks. Like even if you don't care about the movie, this is not going to help. This is going to worsen by quite a bit. Um, and like I said, as far as like this narration goes, that's constant. There are movies where I could see that happening, especially if the dialogue was more clever, which this isn't. Um, but here we have like I wrote one in particular down. There's a point in time when he's like staking out Richard Brake, and then David Morse shows up, and there's a whole bunch of tension. And he's in his car, which is off. And so he's saying, I can't start my car or I'm going to get caught, is what the narration is basically saying. And you might think, oh, because his lights will come on, or oh, because of the noise of his car coming on. No, apparently not. This dialogue has to try to be clever and poetic or whatever. So it's not, oh, I can't turn my car on because I'll get caught, or because it'll make a sound, or because the lights will come on. Nope. He can't turn his car on because, and I quote, plumes from the tailpipe will act just like a smoke-filled beacon. Plumes from the tailpipe will act just like a smoke-filled beacon. And that's what the whole dialogue is, particularly in the narration, is it's trying to like really draw out what you could just put in two simple words, or better yet, make the character practically silent. Let's just watch him operate, but he's got to tell us like his every single move, and it's trying really hard to do that whole clever thing. And like I said, but this sort of cast in this small area, you could have had something here that was a little more. It was kind of giving me vibes of another movie that's not that good either. The Bryan Cranston movie, Cold Comes the Night. I don't know if anybody saw this. It basically, like I said, this isn't very good either, but it's better than this, and they were giving me the same vibes, but then at the same time, this movie reminds me of Kill Shot with Mickey Rourke, and Kill Shot reminds me of a lot of other movies too, so we're just kind of in a whole derivative chain here, and now we've gotten down to what's basically the bottom of the barrel, which is this bullshit. And then it gets to a point to where it's just really drawing itself out. When we get a lot of, like, especially this middle portion, when he's, like, checking out Richard Brake to see what's going on, there's a way too long sequence of him just walking around this dark house. And then later on, there's way too long of a sequence that's just him tediously stitching a wound. And it just goes on completely unnecessarily. It's basically, and I know this is a compliment for a lot of people, but if you're aware of me, you know it's not a compliment from me. The S. Craig Zoller thing, where every little detail must be drawn out to its absolute fullest and milked dry until the runtime is ridiculously long. This is only like an hour 40 something. and it has to get to that point through scenes like this. Where it feels like there's a whole... That house scene of him just wandering around feels like it has to be 10 or 15 minutes long. I'm sure it's not, but it feels like it. And that's a very long time when you're just watching one thing. And it's... Yeah, and then by the time we meet, like, all the characters, which is pretty early on, and then we get to the end, you realize that it is relentlessly predictable. And there's multiple twists. I was even able to predict the order in which the twists were revealed. Like, 35 to 40 minutes in, with, like, over an hour left. And then, so you're stuck there just having to watch it all play out. And it's so up its own ass. There's even a point in time when one of those the most predictable of all the twists is revealed, and the main character says, "I never saw that coming." Okay. So, and this guy is supposed to be, like, really on his toes constantly. Like, that's his whole character. That's what they've been beating into our heads with this character for the whole thing. And the most obvious thing in the entire fucking thing apparently snuck up on him. So, that just really proves your case with this. Alright. And then after a while, it feels like they're just sort of, like, in this whole thing where they're revealing stuff, and obviously it's one of those cases where, because they're so clever, they gotta go back and show you clips we've already seen, but you've got the new context now, and it's like, oh, shit, these guys were so far ahead of me. Which obviously isn't the case. I would imagine not the case for anybody. If anybody, like, with even the lowest of IQ came into this, they'd at least get one or two of these twists, at least. But what's really funny about going back and showing, like, oh, look, this is what was actually happening, it's like, after a while, it just kind of feels like they're just replaying the movie. And it's like, oh yeah, I remember that scene. I don't know how relevant it is to this particular reveal, but I guess we're watching this scene again. So I don't know why they were so desperate about getting the runtime stretched out. It's not like it's fucking an hour long. I don't know. I don't know. But, yeah, it's crap. It's pretty much all crap except for the Anthony Hopkins monologue, which I was going to give it more points for, but I mean, the rest of it is just so fucking bad and so predictable. Yeah, I can't really bring myself to say, oh, there's something good about it. It's just, no, we'll just leave it at that. So, I guess we're done here. So, so I do have another versus I'm going to be doing, and we're going to be doing more review stuff. We've got, Taylor Sheridan's new movie is going to be out there, and, like The Woman in the Window, and The Conjuring 3, and A Quiet Place 2, of course. All that stuff, and whatever the hell else. So, until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.